Hello everyone, Saito here. And since I don't really have much, shall I say, creativity, and I'm sure you've all seen more than enough lists like this, why not have one more? So today I'm going to be talking about the top 5, well in no real particular order, considering I don't really have a number 1 in this case, but 5, I guess, games that I would consider the best that I played of this year. I'll have one disclaimer note for this, is that this is more games that I personally played this year that roughly came out on this time frame. Some of them may be coming out later on, in particular the one that it's coming out next year, very soon. And another technically came out years ago, but only now was finally recently localized for North American markets. It's just, that's a little spoiler right there of one of the things I'm talking about. Anywho, so this is my top 5 games that I played for 2015. Starting off with Splatoon for the Wii U. It's one that I personally was rather excited for since the first time it was actually introduced, or first revealed during one of the, I think it was Nintendo Direct or one of the E3 trailers. I always thought that it looked very interesting, looked really fun, a little take on sort of like capture, instead of not really capture the flag, but more like capture the turf, more or less, and instead of being all about just simply killing your opponents, or in this case, like splatting, it's, claiming the turf of the area, getting as much as your ink or your paint as much from your team, claiming the rest of the entire area. I thought that was a really, really interesting concept that's not really done too much often before, at least not as an actual main, mode. Other games out there have had, say, for example, like a paintball mode of some sort. I know games like GoldenEye or something like that had something like this. They, instead of having, say, for example, let's say a turf war and that sort of game, you'd say it as kind of more of you and your friends just do something for fun, like say, oh, let's just cover this, let's have 5 minutes and just cover up the area here, and that's, whoever covered up them just wins, so it was never really a main game, a main mode for a game. I thought this was really fun to do that. It was also, I also really, really enjoyed the way how they brought out new content for the game. It's one of the few instances I ever heard of where a game technically had disc lock content or data kept behind on the disc that you can't really use, and it's kind of like they kept it, Nintendo kept it themselves until they allowed it so that would give it out for the consumers to be able to use it around, whether it be weapons or new stages or certain events going on. It's cool how there was every single thing that they brought out for it. It wasn't like a paid content. It was all for free, and they're still rolling out new content even by the day. I think there was some new weapons last week, which is really nice. It keeps the game more interesting, keeps it a little more fresh, lets people a few more options here and there for things they want to do, or just keeps the game a little more interesting and more keeps longevity for a little longer, which I think it's really good. I know even with just the single player aspect, which the game surprisingly enough actually does have a single player mode, which most people tend to gloss over or ignore, it was rather enjoyable, very similar to old school style 3D platformers from back during the Nintendo 64 and PlayStation days, which I thought was really fun as well. Really enjoyable, the humor is absolutely hysterical, and it's an overall really, really fun game. One of the favorite games I played for this year. The second game I like to talk about is one that is it's a very divided game. Some people really, really enjoy this one, and some try to kill people for speaking of its name, but it's Undertale by Toby Fox. It's honestly one that when I first started hearing about it, I was kind of skeptical about whether it would be a very good game or not, honestly, because of my personal disliking of the Earthbound or Mother series. I always thought it was kind of an overrated franchise here and there. I wrote that as basically just another game using a modified Dragon Quest engine, but with some quote-unquote quirky humor. That's how I always thought it was. But Undertale was very, very different in that regard, where it had a lot of similarities and a lot of inspiration clearly taken from the Earthbound series, but it took things in its own way, mixing things where not just a typical old school Japanese RPG. It mixing things like bullet hell shooter patterns for enemy encounters, and even incorporating a whole entire mechanic, which some consider to be a spoiler, but honestly it's not, but where you can actually go for the whole game without actually choosing to really fight or kill a monster that you go up against, which brings a whole lot of replay value, making it possible to go for the game at least 3 different times, going for either playing, I guess, like sort of like a normal RPG. You know, you kill some enemies and maybe you don't, or maybe you run, or you can go through never killing a single monster in the entire game or anything, or you could go through a whole entire campaign, more or less, just going and massacring everything on screen, which I thought was really nice. What was really nice about the game is that it had absolutely no regard for the fourth wall, always broke through it multiple times throughout the entire game, and it always seems to throw a curveball and break its own rules, similar, so almost as a form of like part of the storyline, which is really, really nice. The humor inside the games I consider to be sometimes juvenile, but a lot of times it seems very. It's not unlike other games like say like Borderlands or quite a few other games where they have very, I guess you could say, immature humor or really like I guess childish jokes here and there. It doesn't feel like it's forced, or it doesn't feel like it's stupid in a way. Even when there's a joke like a really bad pun in here and there, I kind of like haha you, or it's kind of like it made me chuckle. It made make me cringe or want to strangle the people who made the game. But it's a good thing to know that no matter how bad the humor was in some other games, I will never be Anthony Birch. So overall, I would consider Undertale to be one of my favorite games of the year. The game's story is very, 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 very heartfelt, very good. Graphics aren't too like great per se, but it's made in a sort of like classic style, which the game itself also breaks that here and there, which I think is really fun. The music is absolutely fantastic. It's one of the best soundtracks I've heard in a long time in a video game. It's one of those type of soundtracks that will probably go down for many years to come as one of those really great video game soundtracks. Like how people would look at songs like Super Mario Brothers or Legend of Zelda or even Rockman. This is one of those soundtracks where people will look back and say, yeah, Undertale is one of those great video game soundtracks of our time. So yeah. The third game I'd like to talk about is one of my favorite games for the year is Xenoblade Chronicles X. Well, I will preface first off right off the bat that I have not completed this game. I'm actually probably not very far at all. I think I've only made it to Chapter 7 or Chronicle 7. I'm sure what to actually call it. I actually forgot what they call it. They call it Chronicles or Chapters or whatever. I'm only at that point in the game. I've just recently finally obtained my Skell, which to me opened up the game considerably. Allowed me a much more freedom of movement, much higher reaches for heights, or being able to climb much more hard to reach areas. Not to mention being immensely powerful compared to how I was before. Not that you are particularly weak. Well, you start out very weak, very, 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 very weak. But as you get to the point where you do obtain your skill, you are still considered somewhat powerful. But when you finally obtain one, it's much more. But anyway, I digress. Xenoblade Chronicles X is one of those games where I initially was thinking maybe it's not going to be as good as I thought it was going to be, because I was a big fan of the first Xenoblade Chronicles, or simply called Xenoblade as in Japan. I thought the game was, like, I really enjoyed the first one, but I thought that because the spiritual successor of sorts was not going to contain an actual like main character that was like established sort of way. Since you create your own character, it's more or less you in a game, more in a way. You create yourself, quote unquote, to be in the game, to play as them, and you go through the game. I thought it was going to be kind of weaker because of that, because I really liked the character of Shulk in Xenoblade Chronicles, and I liked the other cast members that are with him. Nearly every single character in that game was very, very likable. They all had something that you could like, or I guess some cases dislike in your own way. There was no like really like unlikable main character in Xenoblade Chronicles. However, in Xenoblade Chronicles X, I can extend that same sort of notion to it to almost every single character except for what's I guess this game's is no pawn replacement, knowing that from the first game they had Riki, and now they have another one named Tatsu. This little thing, I will say, does bog down my experience for Xenoblade Chronicles X a little bit here and there, only because he's quite frankly absolutely annoying, and unlike in Xenoblade Chronicles 1, he was not, at least from what I'm seeing so far, he's not a playable or supporting cast member in terms of your actual party. It just seems to just give exposition, a little bit of information here and there, and overall be the comic relief of the group. But he doesn't actually fight, something that I really liked about Riki in the previous game. Other than that, though, I will say the game's actual overworld is absolutely massive, like unbelievably large. Some would argue to say it's actually the largest game world to date in like video game history. I would not deny that from what I've been seeing so far. I'm probably no more than maybe 30% into the game, and I'm already like going like, how the hell am I gonna remember where to go for these sort of things without things like fast travel or whatever like that. But what is nice about Xenoblade Chronicles X's insanely huge world is that it is very, like, you can tell where certain areas are, you can remember where things are, and there is like multiple different kinds of monsters and wildlife and landmarks to see. So it's not like in a lot of other open world games where you have this really big world and then there's like jack all to do in that world, or a few little missions here and there. In Xenoblade Chronicles X, the world actually feels like a big, huge open world, especially when it comes to their wildlife. Like they've lived their own way. They move like in how a weird, strange alien life world would be like, which I think is like absolutely amazing, especially for what people consider to be a not powerful console for the Wii U. From what I'm hearing, it's actually not too bad, but compared to the PS4, the Xbox One, or the PC, it is considerably weaker. And so it's really shocking to see a game like this massive scale not only be able to run at 1080p, but also run almost consistently at 60 frames per second, as well as be almost devoid of any actual real like game breaking or any kind of real major bugs in the game. Unlike another open world game that's come out recently, like Fallout 4, which is absolutely broken from what little I've got to try out. I honestly did not like Fallout 4 at all, to be frank. I thought it was not that great, but that's just me. The fourth game I'd like to talk about is Fire Emblem If, also known as Fire Emblem Fates. And that is, well, I'll preface where I said from earlier before. This is that game that technically hasn't released yet for the North American market, but I personally was able to play a Japanese version beforehand, and which it did come out in 2015. Hence why I'm talking about it now. One thing I'm going to say right off the bat is, if you were someone who liked the previous Fire Emblem that came out for Nintendo 3DS, you will massively, you will enjoy Fire Emblem If a whole lot more than the previous Fire Emblem Awakening, or also known as Fire Emblem Kakse. Once again, you play as a main character that you create yourself, like sort of like, I guess you're playing as yourself in the game. And unlike in other Fire Emblem games, this game has multiple different like main storylines you can go through. You can either side with like basically 3 different kingdoms, more or less. Either your actual birthright, your original, like where you were born, the side of Hoshido, which is kind of like I guess more or less like a Japanese type of world with like samurais and ninjas, things like that. It's a very Japanese type of setting. And then there's also the side of Nor, which is much more like, I guess, traditional Fire Emblem, a little bit more darker, a little more moody, sort of like a medieval type of like medieval fantasy, Western European type of style. And then there's a third kingdom called the Invisible Kingdom, which is available as like a downloadable content, like a third campaign, which I personally would say do not choose this third campaign until after you've completed at least one of the other 2 campaigns. Even the game itself doesn't even allow you to choose this campaign until you've actually completed one or the other. depending on the version you've chosen. Something that is interesting about Fire Emblem If is that the game was originally released as two separate different cartridges, similar to that Pokemon or Rockman EXE or Mega Man Battle Network, which I actually think is really cool. But at the same time, yeah, it is in a way two games for the price of one. And I mean, one game for the price of two in a way, because it's two different, multiple different games, but they are separately released. One thing that was rather nice still about what they did with this game, and they do have it available also for the North American release coming out really soon in February, is that the game also allows you to purchase both at the same time as either one cartridge, allowing you just to choose between the two, or simply download the opposite version as downloadable content, which I think is really nice. I think it's a really cool little touch they did with the game. As for the gameplay itself, which I should have gotten to by now, it is a much larger improvement compared to how Fire Emblem Awakening was. They do still also have the pair system that they had before, allowing you to have two party members together to fight alongside one another or defend each other and give each other a stat boost in a sense. However, they did revamp it in a way to make it not as overpowered as it was before. One of the main things they changed was that you no longer are able to if you have a pair partner and you have them with you, it no longer has where they automatically defend against an enemy's attack no matter what, depending on how good their support or bonding is. One major change they have now is where a little meter will be underneath your health meter. When that's full, your partner will automatically block the next oncoming attack. So it's not able to be abused anymore. We'll have, say, your main character or, say, Chrom in the previous game, and then someone else they S rank support with, and then have the S rank support just continually block infinite attacks without taking any air damage. They made it much more balanced. Another main difference is that paired characters will not fight alongside one another. That paired character will not engage in battle alongside the one that's in the front. The only way that you'll be able to do, dual attacks is if another unit is next by to the adjacent units next to you, which I guess adds to a little bit of strategy if you want to be able to work it out here and there. The game also still once again has the support system which previous Fire Emblems had, allowing you to have offspring between different male and female characters together, which includes your own main character you create, which can be a male or female, so you can have them marry or become best friends with nearly any other unit in the game, which is rather fun. I am curious and wondering what certain aspects of this game will be changed when it does eventually reach the North American and European market. I do hope that nothing gets altered or, censored in more way, but I firmly believe that nothing really will get changed. There's no real content in this game that's considered, risque or too suggestive to warrant being censored, unlike, say, a few other games that have come out in recent years. And in terms of other little things that are improved about this game, it's more or less kind of the same as how any other Fire Emblem game is. A strategy RPG where permanent death is possible between party members besides your main character, and it's overall a really great game. It's one of my favorites for this year. It was definitely one of those games that I kept continually putting back into my 3DS every single day until I finally beat the main Nor campaign, though I'm still working on Hoshido, and I'll definitely do the Invisible Kingdom once I finish that one as well. And the final game I want to talk about for today is one of my top games for the year. It is one that I honestly did not believe was going to be finally localized, and one that I still haven't completed yet, but I'm very glad that it came out this year as opposed to waiting for it to come next year, and that one is Yakuza V, also known as Ryuga Gotoku 5. This is the fifth, or I guess in the main series, it's the fifth game in the series of the Yakuza series by Sega. This one was released for the PlayStation 3, and it's a sort of hybrid adventure, open world-ish action brawler type of series. And I guess some people also call it Wacky Japan Simulator at the same time. because of all the weird antics and things that you can do in this game. It stars 5 different main characters in the series. Returning cast members for sure known are Kazuma Kiryu, who is one of the who was once a main high-ranking Yakuza chairman from the previous games. Shun Akiyama, who was once a bum who ended up becoming massively rich through a big fluke from a robbery that went wrong. Taiga Saejima, who was a Yakuza member in the past who was arrested for killing multiple people in a big, I guess you call it a hit or assassin gig he was given. And Kazuma's adopted daughter, Haruka, who is also just now finally able to be a playable character. There's one more who's playable, but I have not actually reached that point where I've gotten to play as them yet. I'll be completely honest, I'm not actually finished with this game yet, but I'm trying to get through as much as I can. Compared to the previous Yakuza games, they have definitely improved the fighting mechanics of the games. They've made the traveling from going through the towns a lot more easier. They've also made it much more easier to avoid encounters with like the strangers that sometimes try to challenge you to a fight, which I will say, comparing to how it was back in the first Yakuza and how they keep changing it or making it more improved as the years go by, it's finally a relief to be able to go through a game where I don't have to hear, you know, the enemies, or I guess the rival gangs or random punks or thugs say something like, "Hey you," or "What the fuck?" and just be like, you immediately hear that and you're like, well, great, time for another fight. Oh, here's another fight. Oh, here's another one. You can finally like actively avoid them, and there's no real repercussions. You can still get through the game just by going through, I guess, main story forced fights through the game, and still be very powerful and get through as much as you can. Much like a lot of our games such as Shenmue, which this game draws a lot of inspiration from. I guess some people call it Japanese Shenmue in a way. It does have a very large world you can go through, lots of different strange and wacky activities to get your groove on, such as karaoke, playing actual Sega arcade games such as Virtua Fighter 2, or even third-party games such as Taiko no Tatsujin, which I thought was absolutely hysterical, especially having the characters replace the usual announcer voices from Don and Cuts to actually be that specific character you're playing as. So you could have something like Kazuma, who's like a massively serious and very like stoic character, break into like complete hot-blooded nature and going absolutely ballistic playing Taiko no Tatsujin. So instead of like hearing these cutesy voices, he's going like and just freaking whacking on the drum. That's absolutely hilarious game, while keeping to a very serious tone throughout the actual storyline as well. I think it's very refreshing to see a game take itself so seriously, but also not give a shit at the same exact time. Something that Yakuza always embraced, but seeing it again after how many years it's been since the last Yakuza game came out, which was Yakuza Dead Souls and Yakuza 4, which were, well, 4 was actually really good, but Dead Souls was more or less the nicest way to put it was, well, it was fucking garbage, but this one was very, very good. One of my favorite games throughout the entire year, and it's definitely one that I'll continue to keep playing even after completing it, when I eventually do complete this game. So those were the 5 games that I've considered to be the favorite ones I've played for 2015. If you have any other games that you've enjoyed throughout the year, please leave it in the comment section. And if you do enjoy this video, however strange it was, please like and subscribe. And if you didn't like it, then you can put a dislike as well if you'd like as well. If there's anything you'd like me to improve in the future, please let me know. And if anything else, this is Saito Kojima, and I hope you have a wonderful day.